Picture this. A Japanese samurai steps onto an open field. Across from him stands a fully armored medieval European knight, two of history's most legendary warriors, one trained since childhood in the art of the blade, the other encased in nearly impenetrable steel plate. The crowd goes silent. Who wins? This question has sparked debates for decades. Movies, video games, YouTube comment sections, everyone has an opinion. But most of those opinions are based on myths, half-truths, and a whole lot of anime logic. Today, we're going to settle it the right way. No fan theories, no Hollywood nonsense, just real history, real weapons, and real fighting techniques. And the answer? It's a lot more complicated and a lot more interesting than you think. Welcome to Medieval Archive, the channel where we dig past the myths and get to the real history. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join us. We upload new videos every week. And if you enjoyed this one, a like goes a long way in helping the channel grow. Now, let's get into it. Who were these warriors really? Let's start with a question most people get wrong before the fight even begins. Who are we actually comparing? When you say samurai, which samurai do you mean? A 10th century mounted archer? A 16th century swordsman during the Sengoku period? These are completely different warriors, with different weapons, different armor, and different fighting styles. Same goes for the knight. A Norman knight from the First Crusade in 1096 looks nothing like a 15th century German knight in full Gothic plate armor. We're talking about warriors who lived across a 500-year span. Comparing them is like comparing a World War I soldier to a Navy SEAL and asking who would win. So for this video, we're going to do what historians actually do. We compare the best versions of each. A late medieval European knight, let's say around 1400, in full plate armor, mounted and armed with lance and longsword, against a peak-era samurai from the Sengoku period, around 1500, armed with katana, bow, and years of brutal combat experience. Now we can talk. The armor question. Here's where most internet debates go off the rails, and it usually starts with armor. People assume the samurai's armor was basically decorative. Beautiful, yes, but no match for European plate. That's partly true and partly completely wrong. Let's look at the knight first. By the 1400s, European plate armor had become an engineering masterpiece. A full suit weighed around 20 to 25 kilograms, roughly 50 pounds. But here's the thing most people don't know. It was designed to distribute that weight so evenly across the body that a well-trained knight could run, jump, and fight for extended periods. Yes, really. There are historical records of knights doing cartwheels in full armor to prove they could move. The protection this armor offered was extraordinary. A direct sword slash would simply slide off. Even arrows often failed to penetrate at range. The weak points were small: the armpits, the back of the knees, the visor gap. Now the samurai's armor, called oyoroi or tosei gusoku depending on the era, made from lacquered iron and leather plates laced together with silk cords. Lighter than the knight's, around 10 to 15 kilograms. Much more flexible, allowing faster movement and especially agility on foot. But here's the trade-off. That flexibility came at a cost. The samurai's armor was designed to resist slashing cuts and arrows, not the heavy, blunt force of a European mace or the thrusting power of a longsword. So the knight wins the armor round. But the fight doesn't start with armor. It starts with weapons. The weapons debate. Here's something that will surprise most people. The katana, the iconic curved sword every samurai is famous for, was not actually the samurai's primary weapon. Think about that for a second. The one thing everyone associates with the samurai, it wasn't their go-to in battle. Historically, the samurai's main weapons were the yumi, a long asymmetrical bow, and the yari, a thrusting spear. The katana was a secondary weapon, used when things got close. The katana only became the cultural symbol of the samurai much later, in peacetime, when actual battlefield combat became rare. The knight, on the other hand, carried a full arsenal: lance for the mounted charge, longsword for close combat, mace for breaking through armor, dagger for finishing moves. The longsword in particular was a sophisticated weapon. It could thrust, cut, and even be used half-sword, gripping the blade to use the crossguard as a bludgeon in close quarters. Now, the katana is genuinely exceptional. The Japanese developed a steel-making process that produced incredibly high-quality blades, folded and hardened in a way that gave the katana its famous razor sharpness and resilience. One expert who tested modern replicas found that a katana could actually cut through chainmail and even pierce weaker European plate at the joints. But the knight's longsword had reach, power, and versatility that the katana simply couldn't match against armored opponents. The knight knew how to fight other armored warriors. The samurai, for most of history, did not face that specific challenge. Training, philosophy, and fighting style. This is where things get genuinely fascinating, because both warriors were trained in ways that go far beyond just swinging a weapon. The samurai trained from around age 5, not just swordsmanship, kenjutsu, but archery, horsemanship, calligraphy, poetry, and Zen Buddhist philosophy. The idea was that a warrior who could control his mind could control the battlefield. The samurai code of bushido emphasized something radical: the total acceptance of death. A samurai who had no fear of dying was a samurai who could make cold, calculated decisions in the heat of combat. The knight's training was equally brutal, starting as a page at age 7, becoming a squire at 14, and only achieving knighthood at 21 after years of practical combat experience. The chivalric code demanded not just skill, but courage, loyalty, and religious conviction. Knights fought in wars, tournaments, and sieges constantly. By the time a knight faced you in battle, he was almost certainly already killed people before. Here's an interesting parallel. Both codes emphasized honor, loyalty to a lord, and willingness to die. Two warriors from opposite ends of the world with no contact who independently developed almost identical philosophies of war. Historians find this remarkable. In terms of actual fighting technique, the samurai style was built around speed, precision, and targeting weak points. The Japanese martial arts were highly evolved, with schools like the Katori Shinto Ryu formalizing techniques for finding gaps in an opponent's defense. The knight style was built around power, endurance, and using armor as an offensive tool, getting close, staying close, and overwhelming through sheer force. The fight itself. Different scenarios. Okay, the moment you've been waiting for. Let's run the scenarios. Scenario 1. Mounted combat on an open field. The knight wins, and it's not particularly close. A mounted European knight with a lance at full gallop was one of the most devastating weapons in medieval warfare. The impact force was enormous. The samurai was also an excellent horseman and a skilled mounted archer, but his lighter armor left him far more vulnerable to the knight's charge. If the samurai got a shot off with his bow before the charge connected, he might unseat the knight. But in a straight cavalry clash, the knight's heavier armor, heavier horse, and lance advantage dominate. Scenario 2. On foot in the open. This is much more even. The samurai's speed advantage becomes real here. He's trained to move quickly, find openings, and strike with precision. His katana can find the gaps in the knight's armor at the armpits or visor. But the knight's plate turns most attacks into glancing blows. and one solid hit from a mace or longsword can be devastating. The knight is also trained specifically to fight other armored opponents. He knows how to control distance, use his weight, and go to the ground. Slight edge to the knight, but far from certain. Scenario 3. Close quarters, confined space, a building, a narrow alley. The samurai's agility becomes his greatest weapon. He can move where the knight struggles. His lighter build and faster footwork give him genuine advantages. In this scenario, the samurai has a real chance. The honest answer? It comes down to individual skill, terrain, and which warrior adapts faster to an opponent they've never seen before. Both of these warriors were elite. Both were capable of extraordinary feats. Neither was invincible. So who would actually win? The knight has the edge in most conventional combat scenarios. Better armor, more powerful weapons, and battlefield experience against armored opponents. In a straight one-on-one, on open ground, in full armor, history leans knight. But here's what that answer misses. The samurai wasn't built to fight knights. He was built to fight other samurai in Japan's specific terrain and warfare. The knight wasn't built to fight samurai either. He was built to break cavalry charges and storm castles. Both were perfectly engineered for their own wars. The real lesson isn't who wins a hypothetical duel. It's that two completely separate civilizations, with no contact, no language, no shared culture, independently created almost identical warrior classes, with parallel codes of honor, parallel training systems, and parallel roles in society. That's the truly remarkable thing. Both the samurai and the knight stood at the peak of human combat in their time, and both were eventually made obsolete by the same thing, gunpowder, not by each other. If you want to know more about how medieval warriors actually fought, because most of what you've seen in movies is wrong, check out our next video. Because the truth is always stranger and more interesting than the myth.